you for coming. And it's actually, for some of us who have been observing what has been happening in the last 4 decades, it gives a strange confidence that so many people are still interested in that. Because in the last 4 decades, I'm going to tell you why we conceived of a panel like this. And we were thinking it's the 40th anniversary of 1984, both Operation Blue Star, which actually was followed by Operation Woodrose in Punjab, and then Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India's assassination, and then the pogrom, massacre, genocide. There are various words now which denote the events. And the story about the events has gone, we all know the ways in which it has been said, spoken, and received. We wanted to bring in the voices of those from Delhi's civil society, and such societies exist in other cities in the country as well where this tragedy happened, who were the first respondents to the tragedy. So that is why we tried to conceive of an event like this. In some ways, an acknowledgement. In some ways, these are the people who laid the first stones for this discourse to be built up. But the violence was one part of it. The even greater grievance I have with the Indian judicial system is the impunity it caused in the society. And that why are Sikhs alone fighting for their rights? Wasn't it an assault on whatever India or the idea of India which was given to us? And then what did that impunity cause? It caused later on the demolition of Babri Masjid. It caused Godhra, right? So there's a link to that. Indian history has a parallel of, it has a thread of violence running through it in the last 4 or 5 decades. And it all started with 84. In fact, in some ways, it started with 83 with the Nellie massacre in Assam. In one afternoon, thousands of people were gunned down. So that was the reason to come back to the original people who responded to the violence and to listen to them. Before we start on that, I would request Harinder Singh from the Sikh Research Institute to make a few opening remarks, and then we'll get on to the panelists.
Thank you, Amandeep. Good afternoon, and Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. On behalf of the Sikh Research Institute, I welcome all of you, the panel and the moderator. Please allow me to share a note with you on SikhRI, what is popularly called Sikhism. The initial declaration of SikhRI is IkOankar, which literally means one pervasive and creative force. Now, if you interpret that, but that essentially means there's a unity, as we like to say, of all human beings. Currently, that's 8.2 billion people. Now, interpretively, that means there needs to be zero inequality and inequity in today's vocabulary, because 100% of our DNAs are exactly same, only the sequencing is different. So the policy you work toward from a Sikh perspective is how do you get to that zero tolerance for inequality and inequity. Now, this oneness, I call this a oneness paradigm, not just a oneness which is vague, of pursuing this policy. This got institutionalized by the founder gurus. And when they were institutionalizing this, they did it through love, but the love which is not just self, which translates into justice in the society. To make this policy a reality, 6 of the 10 gurus, the 10 founder gurus, were either jailed, they were targets of political assassinations, they were tortured, or actually politically assassinated or martyred, as it's called religiously. So that's a very important fact to know, 6 out of the 10. So that starts to form in a very early part of Sikhi, how Sikhs are wired, what's in the DNA, why they do what they do regardless of where they are. Once the 10th Guru left this earth, which was 1708, in the next 57 years, there were multiple genocidal campaigns. So I'm trying to get to what, before I put 84 on the map, and as you're more familiar with it, why Sikhs do what they do and what changed in 84. So that the 57 years after Guru Gobind Singh left, multiple genocidal campaigns. Two of them are called in Sikh memory Vadda Kallukara and Chota Kallukara, because in one of them, half of the Sikh population was killed. In the other one, 2/3 was killed. We don't have empirical data, we have anecdotal data, and you can apply some conformal mappings to come up with numbers. Now, what that means is, in those days, the imperial authorities did that. And in that 18th century, 5 decades, the term got coined called Kallukara. This is our native indigenous term. Terms matter because in 84 we have been using series of terms. The Sikh term from Punjabi vocabulary, after surviving these multiple genocidal campaigns, we used to call them Kallukaras. And we didn't differentiate in Kallukaras. And what I mean by differentiating is they were also cordoned. People were cordoned in a particular area. They were targeted, they were killed, annihilated essentially. And the ones who resisted also, and the ones who didn't resist, didn't matter. There was no difference by the authorities. So the Sikh narrative then got coined since then. And the Sikh populations were either self-identified or they were visibly identified. These terms matter because you'll see its application in 84 as well. They were killed in mass, and but even in those exterminations, like the first declaration in 1712, that's what it was called. We have Rajasthani letters from which are reporting by dates as to when the administrations are asking to take people from which town and which kingship or hill states. In the Punjab were called hill state, but there were other states throughout India, including Orchha. I grew up in Jhansi. A person from Orchha was asked to take the troops and go to Punjab and eliminate Sikhs. Why I'm sharing all this is that even when the magnitudes of Sikhs who were killed were very high, Sikhs never had a victim mindset. Never. Never in 18th century. There was exceptional optimism and against all odds, still fighting against injustice. Now, in the Sikh collective memory, I said 1984 then becomes the 20th century Kallukara. I want to inform here what the Sikh way of understanding is before we look at legal and other documentations. So in our memory, it's a 20th century Kallukara, 1984. In Sikh collective memory, they don't differentiate between Operation Blue Star, quote unquote, Operation Woodrose, quote unquote, Operation Shanti, which would have been what happened, which was preponed in November 84, not just in Delhi, but throughout India. So Sikh Research Institute is commemorating this year, 1984, throughout this year, and we are aspiring to present the Sikh narrative of these multiple operations and much more. In 1984, all Sikhs, regardless of their political affiliation or whether they were political or apolitical, condemned what happened in 84. They returned their awards from humanitarian peoples like Bhagat Puran Singh to historians like Ganda Singh. You may not know them, but you may know people like Khushwant Singh, for example, or ambassadors. But it was across the party lines and across religious observations as well. So by the way, then it went to diaspora. Same things happened in diaspora. It was condemned everywhere. So our work is, how do you tell this story without othering? How do you tell this story without invoking any hatred or vengeance? Because in Sikh dictum of IkOankar, we don't have those words. We do have a word nya, which means justice. So we are figuring out how to do this with love, doing it unapologetically while not ignoring the bloody, complex, and tough conversations, rather nuance it by providing context, subtext, and pretext. So let's jump to 20th century quickly, where we are today. Prevention of genocides. This is the term we talk about in last 20 years more, and it starts with remembering. You honor the memory, you honor the resilience and the courage of both the victims of the genocides and their descendants, the ones who survived it, who are still living through those memories, who carry the weight of what Amardeep was partly getting into, the weight of intergenerational trauma, the whole struggle of memory versus trauma, which is being studied. I was 12 years old in 1984. I survived the Punjab sealing of borders from Atari railway station with the Pakistan border all the way to Ambala railway station, which was a Haryana border. And those of you know, because Punjab was sealed. I was coming back from Pakistan because Sikhs used to go during Guru Arjan Sahib's martyrdom day on the other side of Punjab, which is in Pakistan. And we weren't allowed to stay in Punjab. That's how the closing and the sealing of border was a real thing. I witnessed it as a 12-year-old. You can say that was my train to Hindustan. I also survived the targeted burning of our house in Jhansi, UP. Our family left India in 1986. It took me a decade to break in my, what Sardar Patwan Singh used to call the conspiracy of silence. He was referring to in the state and the civil society primarily in state. I actually extrapolated that to say we had a conspiracy of silence in our homes as well, Sikh homes. We didn't have conversation about it. It took me 10 years to deal with a very angry 14-year-old. And I have no problem saying I could have been that guy who picks up AK-47 because nobody's going to tell me what didn't happen because I saw it. It took me 10 years to come back to India, figure out how to deal with these issues in a more educational or documentation or narrative building, and how to talk about this without getting upset. But those are the realities which I lived through as well. So the question is, are we really listening to the stories of genocide survivors and their descendants to understand the devastating impacts of these crimes against humanity? That's a question not just for 84, it's for everything going on in the world today. Are governments and political parties really listening to those voices? We're not interested in politicking of the party because we know party doesn't matter. It's the administration, the system which allows it to happen. And it is not enough to just repeat remarks like, these atrocities shall never happen again. I hear them all the time. In the West, in Canada, in April was a genocide prevention month. I mean, it was on the website of Canadian websites. The Prime Minister said it, Minister said it, while we are witnessing a genocide in front of our eyes since October. Yeah. So these statements have become empty rhetoric. They mattered 50 years ago, maybe even till 80s, global phenomena. But today, it's an empty rhetoric. So today I checked this morning under Genocide Watch, there are currently, as of today, 17 genocide emergencies and warnings globally. Today, not historical. So remembering the darkest chapters of human history includes highlighting advocates for justice, which is what you're going to hear today. Otherwise, building a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community is reduced to corporate hogwash and identity representation, as is clearly being witnessed even in the liberal democracies. And if you don't agree with me, just look at New York City in last year, where Columbia University had an Arab American head, where the chief of police of New York City, as well as the mayor, were African Americans. And what did you get? The students protesting the Gaza genocide were dealt with brute force. So this is not about representation politics or who's heading, if they're of the same community or not. So let's take a moment to remember 1984 Sikh genocide in India and all genocides globally. Let us honor the courage and resilience of all survivors and their advocates for justice, as well as those who participate in the resistance, because there are people who fight back. We must not also other them. Let us also honestly acknowledge that we are not preventing current genocides as much as, almost every nation is a signatory to agree to prevent that, but there is the moral duty is getting failed, and that's why UN doesn't declare genocides, because then there's a moral duty to go intervene. So the acts of genocide begin with targeting and dehumanizing groups of people. Current events globally are calling us to be vigilant and stand against prejudice that leads to the tragic loss of life. But what are the root causes that lead to unspeakable acts of violence? And you hear this statement, I hear it, I will do everything in my power, has been voiced a million times by both spiritual and political leaders. Let's not spare the spiritual leaders as well. But genocides continue. So, in these dystopian times, in September 2024, serious commitment is needed to protect the fundamental rights and dignities of everyone. The governments and international agencies are not intervening to stop genocide. Our collective work is cut out. In the end, I ask, please renew your commitment to become an agent of justice. And if you're not able to become the agent of justice, become their advocate or supporters. May we all feel the one force. Thank you.
Thank you, Harinder. About 10 years back, I wrote my second book called Roll of Honor, and I'd gone to Bhubaneswar to have a launch there. A university junior of mine had called me. He runs a library in Bhubaneswar. So the book was lying there, and lots of people were gathering in the evening, and there was one silent gentleman, very quiet. He picked up the book, he looked at it. It deals with the year 1984, but not with the genocide directly. It deals with what was happening inside a military school in Punjab in that year. And power dynamics and all that. So the event was about to begin, and he called me aside and he said, "Are you from Raurkela?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Your parents lived there?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I was the AGM in 1984. And I am Ashutosh Behra." And I immediately thanked him, because how often do you see the guy who saved your parents? And then Mr. Behra said to me, he said, I started seeing workers of a particular political party putting up slogans on the walls, and I knew something was afoot. So I immediately marshaled the Sikhs in city, around 1,500 families, into the two gurdwaras. And Papa told me that Mishra uncle, our backdoor neighbor, he said, "Sardarji, will not let your house be stoned or burnt." Cherian uncle came from another sector to collect all the documents from Papa. There was an inspector uncle on the road. He sent his police jeep to take my parents to the Gurdwara. And it was this AGM who had actually saved all the Sikhs in town. And as I work on my current book, which is on the Sikhs who live outside Punjab but within India, I've been traveling the country. Now, Jyoti Basu's name is very famous for what he did in Calcutta, though I believe when his plane took a few hours to land and he passed orders. So in that meantime, some violence started, but then immediately the left, being the left, a disciplined cadre, they stopped the violence. But what about Assam, which had a chief minister of the ruling party? He prevented violence there. Or N.T. Rama Rao in Hyderabad. Andhra didn't have violence. There was one traffic commissioner of police. He was almost assaulted, and the rest of the police came and saved him. Of course, there has been a huge politics in Hyderabad after that, which is another story. Or Karunanidhi in Tamil Nadu, or Ramakrishna Hegde in Karnataka, where I now live. Or whoever, I don't remember the name, but Rajasthan. A Sikh gentleman told me how a particular politician from another party sat in his house and called up the chief minister and said, "Aag nahi lagni chahiye, koi marna nahi chahiye." Yes, violence happened in Jaipur and Udaipur. There were properties burnt down, but people didn't die. So what we talk as the Sikh genocide, I'm not absolving any place that, oh, nothing happened here, but was also more or less a cow belt phenomenon. There are many cities on the cow belt which actually burnt at that time. I wanted to bring this in this forum because I was at that time studying in Punjab. And for 7, 8 weeks, my parents could not even communicate to me that they are safe. Telegrams were not allowed, phone calls were not allowed, letters were not allowed, newspapers were saying censored. So Papa had to leave mother at home, travel alone to come and meet me by, I think, end of December and tell me, beta, I'm alive. Hmm? So this happened. Anybody, and it was to me a watershed moment in my life. I had this not happened, I would have written very different kind of books. I would have been much freer to do much more different kind of work. I am still imprisoned by 1984. That is why my work is about Punjab, about Sikhs, about whatever. So this is a part of what is happening. But when we were starting this program and Anika was joining in, I told her, okay, this is the program we have in mind. And she said, I don't know what to tell my nephew. What do we tell the next generation about what happened? There are almost no good stories. There are no stories of justice. There are no stories of, okay, the wrong people were killed or punished or whatever. You know? So this haunts me even now, and I want to return to Uma ma'am, who has taught all her life. She was one of the first respondents in Delhi at that time, and ask her, ma'am, where were you on 31st October 1984, and how did you step in to work?
I perhaps am the only person over here who's witnessed partition also. We lived across the, by some happenstance, across the Bangla Sahib Gurdwara. And I'd spent, me and my brothers and sisters had spent our time going into the Gurdwara. It was not what it is now, It was a smaller, quieter place. And we would go sit there and listen to the Gurbani, recited in a soft voice. We did all the, washed our feet, our hands, and whatever it is before we went in there. And we'd spend the afternoon and then come back. But even we were then shocked because in 47, when the rioting happened, then unfortunately the Sikhs and the Hindus were targeting the Muslims in front of us. So it was a big shock in our lives that is this gentle people sitting over there. What has happened? What is it that's created this kind of thing? It was not quite comprehensible. Also, by one of those accidents of history, my best friend in school was someone who had come from the other side, and she was a Sikh girl. So she and I became very good friends, and we've retained our relationship. She's given me one of the best partition interviews that I collected. But this was also so one. And we used to go to their house, and this relationship, relationship between us and Sikhs, wherever they were around us, was quite strong and strong. I mean, we really didn't see it as distinctive communities. We grew up at that time, at the end of the day. So, but in 84 precisely, again by one of those accidents of history, we were living as tenants in the house of our, the landlord was a Sikh gentleman. He was a school teacher. And we shared a very strong relationship as critics of the establishment, let's put it like that, I mean, I think we'd stood against many establishments, many sarkars. And then 84 happened. And our streets were being taken over by groups of people. There was three Sikh households on that street. The one that we lived in, where Uncle, we used to refer to him as Uncle Hardayal Singh, was the most respected person because he'd been a school teacher, he was a principal of a school. He was a lovely, gentle person. So the shock of it at that stage, and I'll just recite to you, give you a couple of examples of what happened. One is that we were trying to resist, trying to prevent the mobs from coming into our street. And we had a group of students who lived across the road as sort of paying guests in a house. And one of those boys came up to me and he said, "Ma'am," I was wearing a salwar kameez. He said, "Ma'am, aap na अंदर जाकर के साड़ी पहन के आइए." I said, "क्यों?" And then I realized he doesn't want me to look as though I'm a Sardarni because I also live in this as a tenant in the Sardar household. I said, "You're wanting me to now at this point of time separate myself, from the targets," and I was really furious. So that was a small little challenge. But the real tension came because by the afternoon we began to feel that it's not safe. Uncle and auntie lived in the front of the house. We lived at the back of the house. So they were the ones who the street could see. And uncle came. We said, "Aap piche aa jaiye, hamare ghar mein aa jaiye." So he came along, and when he came, he brought, in a sort of surreptitious way, he brought his gun along with him. And he had the most broken expression on his face. He said, "Self-protection ke liye." And my heart really broke because this gentleman was such a gentle person. The idea of any, anything to do with violence was completely against whatever it is. So it was really shocking and terrifying. So perhaps, this is not to say that, because actually I want to claim that we didn't see ourselves. That generation of us did not see ourselves as distinct. I'm a Hindu, she's a Sikh, somebody else is something. No, not at all. We were all products of the so-called Indian nation, and we had fought for independence together. So how are we going to separate ourselves? So that question really never came to our heads at all. But this kind of vision is why ultimately when we put that book together, when I kept on saying...
That was a question for you, so answer it now.
So, how it came about was simply this, that is, it was, and why is it that it is me and Nandita Haksar, and then Nilanjan and everybody else got drawn into it? How is it that we created that corpus? It was because we could see that states put in place their narrative, and their narrative is always to Lipapoti whitewash their deeds. So we knew they were going to do that, and of course we'd all been part of the production of the participated in the making of the Who Are the Guilty, and the Who Are the Guilty is a classic document that indicated that this was not a violence between Hindus and Sikhs. This was a state-sponsored violence against the Sikhs. And it had, so we knew that your relationship to history meant that you needed to put things on the record. And so, as we went around, and it all came, in simple ways. You're going to at the end of 2 days, 3 days, on the third, I think by the third day people were moving around. By fourth, definitely we were going into camps, small camps that had been set up and so on. So we began to see the nature of the violence and what it had done, and it was extraordinary. We had seen nothing like it. So, and as we went and did that, we were also collecting stories because people were talking about what had happened. Kaun aaya tha? Kisne mara? Who were the people who were instigating the riots? So at the end of the day, in 17 years, and it's 17 days, it's a classic for a variety of reasons. 17 din mein, we put that report into place. And it was to show that the violence was organized, that the violence was actually not spontaneous. It was not something that came, it didn't come out of saying hatred for you or hatred. It actually was stoked. It was masterminded and engineered, which is why you had to, that document is called Who Are the Guilty? And we know what it does at the end of the day, It also indicates These are the people who were implicated in a variety of ways. And its consequence is very important, because one of the things that I learned from a Sikh lawyer in the Punjab was, he said, we understood that it was not a Hindu Sikh riot. We understood that it was organized by the state. So they didn't see it as, it didn't lead to violence, rioting violence that happened in other, retaliatory violence that happened elsewhere. So it's very important. I mean, whoever the guilty did was to show you that this is the level of the manipulation of the situation, and it has had long-term. Blue Star had already happened. It had already started stroking. And I'm not going to say that there was no participation. I know that many sections of the press in particular, they were going gaga, about the Operation Blue Star. Matlab, the rhetoric that had been built up at that point of time was to indicate that this is a conspiracy against established rule of law, against whatever it is. So the narratives were being certainly put into place by sections of the media. And let's not consider that the media only became tainted now. The media has been tainted for a long time. I mean, they bring their own biases when they do what they are doing. So I think that at the end of the day, the responsibility that some of us felt, and I was teaching in a college. My colleagues were some of my colleagues are in the book because of the fact that they are the ones who experienced and told us the stories in the way in which they're full of pain and anguish. And as I said, the cry at that stage was, "Humko apne watan ke logon ne hi mara." Pakistan was left behind. ये तो हमारे लोगों ने मारा, ये हमारे वतन के लोग थे. So that was the betrayal. That was the huge betrayal that happened.
I'd like to add a note of kindness here. I think it was 2004 when I went to Uma Ma'am's house. And I said, "Ma'am, I need that book." And she said, "There are no copies available." I said, "Yeah, but I need it. I want to read it." So she gave me her last copy and she said, "If you can Xerox it and return it to me." And it was pure. I was a stranger to her. And she and Nandita Haksar are the creators of the book. And I was just very touched that how could she just give me this book, which is almost precious. I mean, there's no value you can put to it. And that kindness remains. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to come to Professor Sucheta Mahajan. She has been with JNU, and she was also one of the first respondents to the violence. She hadn't taken up the job yet. You were in college, yes. And I want to hear from her. What were her experiences going to Sultanpuri day after day and seeing what had transpired?
Thank you so much for asking me to be here. As I said, I've kept rather silent on the subject all the years, which we'll talk about later, I hope. As Oma said, that we grew up at a time in Delhi. I grew up in Lajpat Nagar as a second child of refugees, Hindu refugees, but my mother came from Kapurthala, which was a Sikh state. Sikhi या Sikh Shahi bolte the. And her mother was, though she was a Hindu Brahmin lady, her name was Mohinder Kaur. So you can understand the amount of integration between the communities that was there. And my grandfather grew up in the household, though he was a Brahmin boy, of the Maharajas, the Ahluwalias, Jagatjit Singh and all that their children. These are two boys who were very naughty, according to Jawaharlal Nehru writes in his autobiography. You might come across this. They were sent to Harrow to be disciplined, as public schools were famous for, the sort of caning, and they thought that these boys would be disciplined. And Nehru writes that They were totally berserk. They used to run down the corridors all the time and did nothing. And then when they were brought home, so my mother's father, who was orphan, um, he was taken into the royal household, saying this is a Brahmin boy and he will have some good effect on them. So that was the kind of relations that we grew up in. My mother tongue was, of course, Punjabi. We spoke only Punjabi till I went to school. And if you remember the politics of that time, the Arya Samaj and took up the line that the Hindus should oppose the Punjabi Suba um, on the ground that we speak Hindi. And so the joke used to go that when the census uh, officials came around to the houses, to so they would say, the lady of the house would say, "Sadi matar bhasha Hindi hai." you know so I'm just giving you a feel of that, of the time how we grew up. When we shifted to New Friends Colony again, the Sikhs were neighbors. I'm mentioning New Friends Colony because a lot of violence took place over there. And we many of our neighbors, their shops were burnt. They were not individuals, it was property, but we were able to save a lot of people. And that's how it began. Before we went to Sultanpuri, I was a student in JNU. My brother was at home, and Gurmukh Singh Musafir's house was just across the road. So the first thing was to be standing outside there and saving the house. And then we heard of Nagrik Ekta Manch, that people are getting together in Lajpat Bhavan. Lajpat Bhavan was this community center belonging to Servants of People Society. And we used to go there to play and all that when we were in Lajpat Bhavan. Now we were here. So we joined there. And that's where we met Nilanjan and my brother and I. And of course, there were many other very, very active people. So it wasn't very organized in the beginning. Somebody said, I think some people are needed, some activists are needed in Sultanpuri. Udhar jaake dekh ke aao kya ho raha hai. So we took a bus, or we took something, and we went along to Sultanpuri. We also came across, I remember meeting Veena Das with a group of her young students from Delhi University. And there was Meeta Bose, who came from IP College, which was my old college. So it was all spontaneous effort. There was Anil Chandra, who had um, a factory in the area, and he just picked up his jeep and piled on a lot of um, gunny bags, boris of atta and stuff, and just we found him standing there and just distributing this. So when we went there, we had no idea about what was needed, whether it was relief or rehabilitation or just talking or documentation. There was no plan. And we were just taken aback. I remember the first day we were told by the widows in A block, I think it was, about their husbands who had been burnt right there. And the with garlands, there was the word they used, of burning tires was sort of thrown on them. And a lot of material evidence of the killings and the burnings was very much there. There was a lot of loud crying. I did want to mention that um, these were Sikhs, and this is something I, as a historian later on, and then also I was doing a PhD, I remember, in history, and used to work on communalism, etc. And these were not Sikhs as we knew Sikhs. They were from Rajasthan, and they were known as Lubhana Sikhs. Originally from Sindh, thank you. And they were doing these small industrial works, mechanics, maybe making knitting charpais or whatever. The point is that this was the first phase where It was about 3 months in all that I remember going. And the second part of it was with another organization which continued later, which was Saheli and Jagori. And there, Gauri, Gandhi, and Abha, and a lot of women activists from these organizations. We used to go there when the widows had been, Sikh widows had been allotted small tenements, very small tenements in Tilak Vihar. We used to go there. And what was very disappointing, if I can use that word, and this was part of the questioning I had in my mind. What do you write? If you write, it's going to be so self-critical of your own practice.
So
And
that,
we can talk about it
yeah,
later.
no,
But,
we'll
but just
bring
to
it in
stop
here
here,
itself.
but just to stop
no,
here,
we can bring it in here itself.
about the Sikh widows, that the word for me, for the first time I heard Dusra Batwara. That was a very interesting word for me because my parents were refugees. And but like many refugees, Harinder used the word conspiracy of silence or some such word, yes. And there was totally a conspiracy of silence in our household. Only when I went to Texas last year, and my uncle lives there. He teaches at the university, and he's the only surviving member of my father's generation. And he told me about how they had crossed the border, they came, settled in Kadia, and also an aunt who was killed crossing the border. Unko Shani bolte the. She had a lot of money, and she didn't want to leave her gold behind. तो वो अपने घोड़े पे और ऐसे रख के ना, and with her little sort of thing here, tied over here, the gold and everything. And they knew when she left, the people back in the village knew that she was leaving with her gold and stuff, and she was rich. So the poorer people just crossed the border and settled in Kadia, which is where the Ahmadiyya sect, as some of you know, have their headquarters. And they came and settled there. So it was my uncle who, for the first time, who told us about the stories. My mother, interestingly, since Harinder raised the issue of memory and history, never spoke a word about anything. Till my friend Swarna Iyer, who went to do a PhD in Cambridge in the 1980s on partition of Punjab. And she wanted to talk to some women, and she said, "Can I talk to your mother?" I said, "My mother has no stories." And even her stories were this kind, a kind of pose where she'd say, if you asked her, "So what are your stories of partition?" She'd say, "I wish I had some stories of partition." We even came with our charpais. So she had this kind of pose, as I said, if we had lost our charpais, then at least we would have had sofas. Asita hune vi asi charpai te sonne asi chatte. She would say in this very kind of, as I said, almost condescending kind of way that they hadn't really made so good. So but when Swarna came and talked to my mother said, my husband, he was very close to the RSS in the days of partition in Lahore, and in the middle of the night, my husband, he opened the door, and these people came, and they had come from looting a Sikh village, and they came with all their guns and all that, and they came and took refuge there, and they slept till the morning. And she said, next morning I told him, this is not going to happen again in my house. But she wanted to protect either her husband or her family. She didn't share this with us all these years. As I said, it only came out with a person who was an outsider and a academic. So even any partition stories, like I asked her one day, I said, every time people say that women were stayed on there, and what is there surely must be some women who were impacted in our family. Then she said, since you're after me, I'll tell you. And then she told me about a woman in our family who was recovered 10 years later, like in 1957, her husband, and we used to know her as Janak Bhenji. And she lived in Malkaganj, and we lived in, what's it called? Kamla Nagar, next to university. And my mother said, she's a widow, that her brother found out about her, and he went and he got her. So, the what I'm trying to emphasize, I'll stop here, um, is the is a kind of unraveling, or it's a continuum, I would call it that. I see the life of our family, the relationship with the Sikhs, even with Muslims, as a kind of continuum from the time of my grandfather. I mean, that's when we have his pictures and all, say early 20th century, and I would say till now. There's a kind of continuum, and 84, in a way, is part of that continuum. We did what we could, or what we did because we had to, because we were Punjabi. It didn't matter that we were Punjabi Hindu at that time, though some of my uncles and aunts in Kapurthala had come to Delhi, and they were very communal, because the people who were shot at, brought out of the buses and all in 83. So they had panicked then, and they had to give up their business in Sultanpur Sahib, etc. So they came and said, buy us something in Gurgaon, do this, etc. They were just said. So that thing was there. But somehow it didn't this thing. And one last thing, a very close friend of ours in the university, we saw that impact there, that how people did become a bit closer to their communal identity. And it took a long while for them to, get out of that minority kind of thing. Yeah.
So, why didn't you write about 84 at all?
I don't know. One, of course, that, as I said, that I was, my experience of or understanding, however limited, of the politics of what was happening was rather different from what other people felt. For example, I saw more of what I'm calling sullen resentment by Hindus in New Friends Colony. Through that 1980s, it was already there, a competitive communalism which was there. And I remember our neighbor, my mother was at that time, she was in fact in Texas in 1984. And she attended a condolence meeting there, and her paper, photo came and all. So Mrs. Puri she said, your mother's not here, you have to be very careful. Don't take a auto which is run by Sikhs. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੁਣ ਪੂਰਾ ਬਦਲ ਗਿਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ Operation Blue Star ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹ ਨਾ ਲੈਣਾ. Then another very interesting thing, because we were one of the earliest inhabitants of New Friends Colony, we had shifted there very early. I don't know any of you are familiar with this. There's something known as the Mata Ka Mandir in Delhi. And it is the only temple of its kind, in the sense it was built by the contributions of some very elite people, starting with S.C. Thabra, who was the commissioner, or whatever the word is called, of the NDMC. And then many other people. And if you look at things, and when they went around collecting the money from the houses, they said, ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖੋ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਲੇ ਦੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ. I remember this word. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਕਿਲੇ ਦੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿਤੇ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ, they need to take refuge, they have these places to go to. What do you have? What do you have? That small temple in L Block, where we used to go during just Janmashtami was the only time I remember going. And also, as a Punjabi Hindu community, it wasn't very Hindu in that ritualistic way. I understood Hindu ritual when I married a UP Brahmin. Then I understood what it meant. But Brahmins were not Brahmins in that kind of a way. It was very eclectic, very very eclectic. And so this Gurdwara was a high watermark of that competitive communalism between Hindus and Sikhs, which I think started off. Certainly, it was there by the early 80s, and that is why the reaction to there was no there was a in the colony. I remember people saying when 84 happened, the he was killed. A lot of stories would come. Oh, you don't know what was happening inside the Gurdwara. What happened? What to do? The government had to go in. The army had to go in. There was there was a difference between the Sikhs and the Hindus had very much emerged by this time, and you could feel it in the way, even in the women's organizations. You know, it was there in every way, and that was one reason. I also felt that um, Hindus that at that time also from then on I was also a little unhappy about the Sikh the Tilak Vihar whole entire thing because there I thought here were we working here and who takes the gets away with the loyalty of the Sikh widows, who are the people whom they trust, the Sikh Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee. It was they who would come, the Babas, the Granthis, and come and say, Ki, haan ji. What, despite our talk about secularism, and not just talk, हम गाने गाते थे, we used to go there, बहनें दूर दूर से बहनें आई हैं, and sing all the women kind of songs. But inside the houses, that there was the entire narrative was one of the narrative of martyrdom. That is, the boys were told, ਤੈਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਹੈ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖੀ ਤੂੰ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਪਿਓ ਨਾਲ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਉਹ ਜਲਿਆ ਕੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਹਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਇਹ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਹੈ ਬਦਲਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਹੈ. It was very strong, the Tilak Vihar experiment, this thing. And then I was writing my thesis and I was reading up on Gandhi in Noakhali, and I was saying, look how different Gandhiji's attitude was. He didn't allow any tenements, any things to be built up. He said, no, the people must go back to their villages because otherwise there will be, you must get people together.
Segregation.
There will be the segregation will be there. And that kind of bringing people together. I thought that our class or gender, whatever, we tried to bring in. Or maybe simply because we were coming from middle class, urban, not elite, but certainly middle class, urban kind of setup, we were not able to have that type of, I would say, ideological impact. Certainly, what we did was very important. There's no doubt about it. But thank you. I'm sorry if was a little, what do you call it, emphatic or used words or, images which might be a little disturbing. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. We are talking about a disturbing phase, which has continued for 4 decades. And your opinion is very, very important.
Sorry.
Before we get on to Nilanjanda, I want to bring up something else. 4 or 5 minutes. I spoke actually on Uma Ma'am's prompt. I spoke to Lalita Ramdas, and she was very excited. She wanted to come, but she is aging and she is not well. So then I said, if you could send me a video recording of your statement. So she could not do that as well. But today morning, she sent me 3-4 clips, about 1 minute, 1.5 minute each, on just her thoughts of that. And it's sort of unfinished, but I want to play it out to you so that you hear, because I think for who she was at that point, the wife of the head of the Eastern Command in the Navy, and for the work she did, which they are testimony to, uh, is it's very important that we just hear her voice. And I have seen her over years now. She will go and stand for anybody who is oppressed. It is not, she is not biased in that sense that, okay, I'll stand for these and not that. She just speaks her mind.
So, why and how did I get involved? I was the wife of a senior naval officer commanding the Eastern Naval Fleet off Vishakhapatnam and running a small organization called Ankur in Delhi, working with non formal education with minority and other communities in slum and resettlement colonies across the city. How did someone like me end up breaking curfew, marching with Swami Agnivesh, and thinking, who will inform my husband if those goons attack us? Managing the relief camp at Nanaksar Gurdwara, using our Lodi estate house night after night as the adda for painstakingly collating the testimonies, all of which went into that unique report, Who Are the Guilty? Amongst So, how did it all begin? For 3 years from that day till my husband was posted to Cochin as CNC of Southern Command, my life was completely absorbed by this event and the aftermath, including providing a personal testimony before the Justice Ranganatha Mishra Commission of Inquiry against the advice of all my late husband's colleagues, but with his support to go ahead and follow my conscience. But today, in an atmosphere where most are fearful and silent, not knowing when a vindictive state will come after them, it is important to recall, as Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay rightly recalls in a piece that he penned as an obit in The Wire, the passing of Admiral Lakshminarayan Ramdas evokes memories from 1984 of a different India. Paradoxically, the only part he played in the events which evoked my recollections was possibly a conscious decision to look past what his other half and her associates were engaged in. That was an era where those in the regime were more sure footed and did not shout treason at every step to consolidate their position. The reason why the passing of Admiral Ramdas serves as a reminder to the gory months of 1984, besides it being the 40th anniversary year, was because such responses are unthinkable in today's India. The regime then disagreed with accusations made, stonewalled demands for proper investigations, and rejected calls for punishing the accused. But at no point did they disparage critics and delegitimize criticism. Yes, this is the significant and sad transition we have made, and which we will all have to fight and resist in every possible way. 40 years later, remembering October 31st, 1984. The scenes, the slaughter, the disbelief, the anger, and the despair are as haunting and as fresh as if they took place yesterday. I would have joined you on this important panel this evening. Alas, I had to say no, because I have been confined to home with a rather severe problem of feet neuropathy, which has affected my mobility. Inshallah, it will be temporary. When Amandeep spoke to me a few weeks ago that there was a plan to exchange stories of how and why such a wide cross-section of people came together so spontaneously under the banner of Nagrik Ekta Manch, NEM, I was excited. I tried to look up my old notes and articles and found that Google had meticulously put many of them online, some of which even I had forgotten that I have written over the years. Yes, these are the stories which must be told by at least some of us who were there from the beginning. Amongst our group of dedicated teachers in Ankur were 3 Sikh women. We were at a meeting in our house class office when news began trickling in about the assassination of the PM. As soon as we heard who the attackers were, we sent them home to their distant and different destinations. Anxious for news, we somehow managed to get through on a landline. Remember, this was an era with no mobiles, only to be told of smoke plumes rising from different parts of the city and attacks already beginning on Sikhs. For many of us, this was how it began. The concern for our friends and colleagues from all walks of life who were mercilessly targeted and done to death in the most terrible manner. It mattered only that there was a male with a turban, and it seemed like the capital had turned into a slaughterhouse, sadly incited, aided, and abetted by members of the ruling political establishment.
Thank you. And with that, I'll come to Nilanjan and ask him, of course, about Nagrik Ekta Manch and how it came about, and also about what he writes books, 7 books by now, 5, and they all deal with one subject. But one of those books is about Sikhs. So, what did he think was the gap in the Sikh discourse which he wanted to fill with his book?
Thank you, everybody on the panel, and getting the opportunity to meet some people who have actually became lifelong friends for 1984, all because of 1984. We almost feel that we have a right over each other. I've always said that. Lalita Ramdas, she still remains, lolly. That's the way. I can't think of speaking to her and addressing her as anything differently. She sent the same messages to Amandeep this morning, which she sent to me also. And she said that, look, I was just 44 then. I said, oh my God, I was just 23 then. I'd lived only 1/3 of my life. I have lived 2/3 of my life after the events of that period. That period decided what I am going to be doing on the 2/3 of my life so far. I do not know whether I'll continue to do the same thing or not. Before I go into this, just a little bit of an addition to what Sucheta said, because then we will get completely diverted. She talked about Tilak Vihar, and I completely agree with the fact that, yes, there was a very disturbing story which did not take away the pathos of the colony and the sufferings of the people. But as people who tended to look at politics more holistically, there was a very disturbing element which was there every time we came back from Tilak Vihar. When I went back there for researching my book 30 years back, I was researching it in 2004-5. That is the time when I was going around meeting people, trying to put stories of all of us, all the victims, the various other people who got involved with the investigations, all that together. There was a different kind of, they had been forgotten. There was just some people would come. There was a complete void. There were some people who had actually done very well because of, resorting to the same kind of chalupanti, which is very common in society. I think, that Tilak Vihar calls for a very sensitive portrayal by a writer. I do not know if I'll be able to do it. I do not know what genre would be the best one. It can be even fiction. It can be even fact, because there are certain chapters of life where I feel that fact and fiction almost overlaps all the time. 84 and its aftermath was one of them. The little bit of point which I want to add is that we all keep on talking about who are the guilty. We all played an important role. We were also going out, fanning out, collecting stories, taking the list. These are the people who have been named by people that they accused. After the 84 riots and all that, the revenge killings started. Reprisals started. Many people were killed. Some of them, whose names were in the blacklist in the book, which used to be, by that time, it used to be referred to among the victims of the pogrom as Kali Kitab. They obviously didn't know English. It had been translated into Hindi also. but it was known as the Kali Kitab. 2 years later, I do not remember, how it actually started, but there was Smitu Kothari, who was actually one of the spearheads of this book. And there were a couple of others. Shumanto Da was not there in that discussion. Somebody raised that, do you think we made a mistake by putting the list of the people who were named in a verbatim manner, because many of them got bumped off without actually any of us really being sure. We were not able to investigate that whether they were involved in the actual attacks in different parts of the city or not. I think by the end of the evening, all of us agreed that yes, that is a question which we can, we would like to go back and discuss it way back in 1984 if we actually can go back and take a decision on that. So that's something, which I wanted to put. Amandeep was saying, about being obsessed with Punjab, writing only on that, So, it is actually, 84 has actually been a very defining moment for what all of us have ended up doing. At 23, I had done a bit of journalism. I had covered a communal riot, Meerut, 1982, written for a couple of newspapers, worked in a monthly magazine for about 10, 11 months. Environment was the big issue of the 1980s, along with Silent Valley, all that, So environment was something which was there. And I had got drawn into writing on environment and a very neglected aspect of environment, that is occupational health hazards. So it's because of connections through friends that I managed to, go to Nagda, this small town in Madhya Pradesh. Gwalior Rayon had a factory because we heard certain rumors that there was a large-scale hydrogen sulfide poisoning happening among the workers who were working in Grasim, leading to the case of very severe impotency among the workers there. So as a very preliminary visit, I had gone there and I was staying with the trade union leader, where in the middle of the night we got attacked, and people tried to, throw boulders. And it was a month of summer, and we were, attacked. So I came back to Delhi, and on the 31st of October, sometime around 10:30, I had an appointment with Alok Mukhopadhyay, no relative of mine, who was at that point the country director of Oxfam. He had heard about what I had picked up from Nagda and wanted to learn more about it, and also to see if, how, from where resources could be put together so that I could actually go back and do some meaningful field work and actually put together a report. There were a couple of people. That's the first time I also met Anil Agarwal. He was also there. Both had their office in Nehru Place. While I was just telling these stories, they got a call, and Alok spoke and said, "Oh, are you sure? Are you sure?" Some monologues, here and there. Then he said, with a very, very tense-looking face, "Indira Gandhi has been shot. Does not look very nice." So without thinking, and the story got half told, we all jumped into his jeep and we were there. By about 12:30, 1 o'clock, we were in front of the institute. By evening, we knew that what was happening. Crowds were becoming restive. I was staying with a friend. We used to share a flat in, a room rather, in Katwaria Sarai, and I had very close friends with the Sikh family who stayed in Monirka. I was getting quite worried because spontaneous attack had started on a couple of Sikhs in front of the medical institute. So all these people, that's where I met, people like, Ravi Chopra, Smithu Kothari, I said, several people, who were all, doyens of the civil society, human rights activists of that time. So around 5:36, they said, you have to go, you want to go to Monirka, you go. So I took a bus, you had this 666 buses, from GNU. So I got that, went to Monirka, and so immediately we realized that there was a problem in hand, because by the evening at 8 p.m. and crowd started going around. we were not very sure that whether my friends and their family, it was a large family, they had 8 people, all Sikhs. One of the cousins who used to stay with them, he was a Mona. 1st of October, we moved them to one family friend of theirs in IIT, who was a professor in IIT, moved them, and we took charge of the house, I and another friend of mine, and we joined other fellow citizens of Munirka to take part in the night patrol committee. There was also this gentleman, I'm forgetting his name now, who later on became one of the doyens of the right to information movement. Anil, I'm forgetting the name. 2 or 3 days later, when things kind of became a bit better, but my friends Arvind and his family, they were still staying in IIT. I gave a call to Alokda and I said that Alokda, he said, where are you? I told him that I've been taking care of this family. They said, Reni, you come, you come to Lajpat Bhavan tomorrow. We are all doing great work. I think it was the 3rd or the 4th of October that I went in the morning. And what I witnessed there was a completely, I never really expected that kind of a situation, scene. There's all kinds of people walking in. The moment I walked into the room and all these people were sitting, some of them I met on the 31st. Somebody came and, gave a bunch of chabis, and said, ki ye 10 gaadiyan rakhi hui hain, please use them and I'll come in the evening at 6 o'clock and I'll take the gaadis back. They didn't know who the gentleman was. He later on turned out to be one of the top industrialists of that particular time. What I figured out is that they were getting more and more reports of very disturbing developments coming from the city, different parts of the city, and people were fanning out at that point. So initially, the first 2 days were spent, everybody was finding work for themselves to do. So I said, that all this stuff which is coming in is lying on the ground. Should we not move it to the auditorium? You remember there was a badminton court kind of a place. So yes, along with 2 or 3 other people, we started actually lifting and moving them, and suddenly you had about 10, 15 people more joining. So it became a fairly big crowd, and so we so that's the kind of voluntary work which people found for themselves. Then we started going out to Sultanpuri, which you met. I still remember the names of those blocks, C4, A4, all those haunting things. We also used to go to Mangolpuri, another resettlement colonies. If I'm not wrong, at least in my case, so I'm 100% sure. I'm not very sure about Sujata and Ajay also. Ajay was also part of our group. It was my first visit to anything like that in Delhi. I'd never been to something called resettlement colonies, but just would read about it occasionally in the newspapers, and newspapers also didn't do much coverage of what resettlement colonies were. Well, yes. I think that's a very correct way of actually putting up. And it was a different kind of world. It was all these one-room tenements. Couldn't really imagine anything, and everything had been pulled out. The window panes, the doors, they had been either burnt. Everything was ransacked. But Sultanpuri we were going because it was among those few resettlement colonies where the number of killings had not been very high, as a result of which a large number of people had not moved to any of the relief camps, but they were continuing to stay there, which is why it was felt that Sultanpuri needs to go with ration, food. So we had a matador. You had these matador vehicles, about 10 or 15 seaters. That is where we used to, about 6 or 7 of us used to leave by about 9 o'clock every morning, and we used to come back about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the night. So the initial phase in Nagrik Ekta Manch, everybody said that spontaneously it came up, was essentially food, clothing, then subsequent to that, and investigations. These were the 3 main things of what Nagrik Ekta Manch did. Then by the end of October, when a large number of people were November, sorry, my mistake. By the end of November, by when it was beginning to turn cold and people were not willing to continue to live in the relief camps were bulk of, they were staying in the open, wanting to go back home. But going back home was a problem because they had either been burnt or the doors had been knocked taken off, windows had been destroyed. So there came the first round of rehabilitation. That is, that how do we must try to repair these houses. So a team was set up, to look after rehabilitation, repairing these. Contractors were finalized, places were done, but prior to that, surveys had to be done. So we did surveys, and Sucheta would remember, we did surveys, the extent of damage in various houses. And we went not just to Sultanpuri, but various other Trilokpuri, Kalyanpuri. We went to all different places, did survey. So there was a survey team, and then guiding the people, the contractors who were actually putting these up. Once that phase was over, by which time election season had started, the month of December, that these people have returned to their homes. But how do they live? How do they make their earning? Because the bulk of the people, as had said, these they were daily wage workers. These Sikhs, some of them are also the Sikh League Sikhs. They were also there. A bulk of them were locksmiths, ironsmiths, carpenters. People who were dependent on their daily tool. Those had been destroyed. They had been taken away. So another team was formed to continue these surveys of who requires what, what kind of instruments. So then, that was the second level of rehabilitation, of professional rehabilitation. Nagrik Ekta Manch was also able to collect certain amount of donations. You can't actually, if I actually say, in my book I have related, that you would suddenly spot, Tejeshwar Singh was one of the most regular people. Amitav Ghosh, we didn't know, the world didn't know Amitav Ghosh, the writer, at that point, just a budding writer, but he was there, He used to, keep a record in the office. M.K. Raina was managing transport, M.K. Raina, the theatre. So various people had all kinds of, he was known as transport in charge. Every evening in Nagrik Ekta Manch, after everyone would finish the day's work, we would come back, and every, camp coordinator or a colony coordinator would give a report of what they have seen, how the people are faring, and what they think needs to be done for the next day. And the resource generation team would then start doing it. By which time, the kind of support which was coming, it was coming to a great extent from the escorts group. They were actually providing us with a great amount of transport to the Nagrik Ekta Manch, trucks, buses, small buses, all these vehicles were being provided. It might sound very funny, but yes, the volunteers who were going out or either working in this thing, they needed to eat something. And obviously, the food, the rations which was being taken, the langar which was being cooked, they being middle class, wouldn't have been able to. Sorry, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, okay. I'll just, Aishar also. Yes, Aishar also, and escorts, they were there. I was talking about, that food, I remember somebody, who later said he's Mr. Nirula, the Nirulas came, with the entire truck. They would come every morning, the tempo full of small burgers, for people to eat of Nagrik Ekta Manch, just something like that. So it was essentially the, a very voluntary outpouring of providing assistance. The most important thing, which has been said by some people, that the state at that point was not depicting Nagrik Ekta Manch as anti-national. That is the most important takeaway. That provocation was there from the PUCL PODR report. When we actually look back, it was a very provocative, report. Even that was not branded as being anti-national. It was very clear that this is something against the perpetrators of something which should not have happened. Nagrik Ekta Manch also coordinated and sent a team. There were 3 of us. I still can't believe, I was telling my wife this morning that I can't still believe that in the month of December, 3 of us sitting in an unreserved third-class compartment with a thela on the floor, carrying 10 lakh rupees. Never seen, touched that kind of money. Nobody had. And we were there and we were told that, at the railway station, you'll be met, so and so gentleman is going to come. He was part of there was a coordination committee of various gurdwaras in Kanpur which had been formed because Kanpur was one of the very badly hit cities. And they didn't have money at that point because of various reasons. The businesses had got hit very. There were mainly the Sikhs were involved in transport business in Kanpur. So they had been very badly hit by that. So, it was essentially what happened is that, when I look back at my own journey, I say that Nagda got left behind on the 31st of October there. And thereafter, it only became religious conflict. It's just a matter of time, that from 1984, Ayodhya evolved. And that is how my dogged pursuit of trying to understand the same thing with a slight amount of difference of focus. Essentially, religion being the primary basis of social identity. That is what led to 84 to a certain extent, and that is what is still unfolding even now.
About revenge killing because of the names in the who are the guilty and whether the name should have been mentioned or not mentioned. There has been only 2 revenge killings. One is of Arjun Das and other is of Lalit Makhan.
Yeah.
Lalit Makhan was member of parliament of that time, and that area, Patel Nagar, and that area where even Mahavir Chakra winner Manmohan Veer Singh Talwar, his house was burnt, and rather he was arrested. Nobody was touched in the mob. So that kind of things were happening in that area. Arjun Das' brother was the one who started at the Ames the small group of about 40-50 people which has attacked the president's cavalcade and broke the window panes of president's car. That mob was led by Arjun Das' brother. So this was open secret, only those 2. Now, mentioning names or not mentioning names. Now, Andy Pancholi is here. Andy Pancholi, along with Justice Tarkunde, also gave the report. That report did not mention the names. Then Citizen Commission report also came. Citizen Report Commission also didn't mention the name, but mentioned the places and in the sealed cover gave the names to the government that here these are the names. Now I tell you how mentioning the names benefited us. During this the investigation and the cases against these people. Who are the guilty was one of the main sources which we used against Jagdish Titler for filing of the charge sheet and now for framing of the charges against him. After 40 years, maybe you are thinking whether you did right or not, but we say, thanks, you mentioned the names. After 40 years, we used that book. Now, as far as the Citizen Report is concerned, that time during Nanavati, we had to call Gurbachan Singh, the former ambassador, to give evidence because he was the secretary of the Citizen Commission. So he had to come and give evidence that in our investigation, Titler's name came up. But that remained only his statement. It is not like the first document which came out within the first 2 weeks of this actual happening on 17 November 1984. Who are the guilty, which gave the name. So the value of this document and the value of his statement has a lot of difference. So thank you so much that you gave this name. Now, as far as Nagar Ekta Manch is concerned, let me tell you, my own impression is, if all you people wouldn't have gathered, and this became a place where the help were pouring in. The people from Delhi, the people from all over the country. I mean, of course, the Sikhs were mostly devastated. It was the non-Sikhs who were helping, pouring in, giving. And they were giving, when the winter started, they were giving the warm clothes, they were giving blankets, they were giving quilts. So If the Nagar Ekta Manch had not been there, it is not only during this a genocide, the death would have been much more in the relief camps and by the epidemics. It is the Nagar Ekta Manch who sent this relief, collected this relief, sent the doctors, gave the medicines. So thank you so much for that. Now, as far as these titles is concerned, you see, it's not any secret that the threat which he gave me. This was openly in the TV in the live debate. So this happened in September 2004. It was a live debate with Rajiv Sardesai, and that debate is on the net. Many people might have seen this also. And there was a very heated exchange, and he even said, "You won't be any more. You will be finished." When open threats, and when it had gone so bad that the Rajiv Sardesai had to switch off program, cut immediately, immediately after that, and it was happening. It was live program, and after this happened, Jagdish Title was the union minister that time. When this happened, after that, the NDTV staff came and surrounded me. They said, "We will go and leave you at home." I said, "Don't worry. ये सिर्फ ये बढ़ के मारते बोलते ही हैं, ये कुछ नहीं करेंगे. Don't worry, I am not scared of him." But anyhow, they were not prepared to leave. On the other side, we have Kamna Vora ji here. Kamna Vora is a lawyer. She has been assisting me since last 25 years now, doing the cases of the victims. Jara udhar dikhaiye ji Kamna Vora ji, please. And she was watching the program. She was frantically calling my family, and everybody was so worried. So what happened after that? That was one time. I will tell you slight about this case and the background also. Then the second time was in the Karkadama court. That was also in the full media view. When the title was given the ticket, and he was given the clean sheet, second time clean sheet, he was given the ticket, and we challenged that. And there was pressure was being built up to withdraw his ticket. This was when the journalist Jarnail Singh threw his shoe on Chidambaram. This was 2 days before that. That in the court, his supporters came, and in front of the media, they tried to attack me. Anyhow, there were some volunteers with me, some victims. They took me back into the courtroom, and this also happened. So this is it. Now the background, let me tell you this. The main witness against Jagdish Titler, and you asked about the investigation by the CBI. CBI gave clean sheet to Titler and tried to involve me into it. This was the attempt of the CBI. Main witness against Jagdish Titler who gave the statement, his name was, he's no more now, Gyani Surinder Singh. He gave the statement that he was there. He was employee at Gurdwara Pangesh, where the 3 Sikhs were burnt alive and Gurdwara was set on fire. He was employed there. So he filed his affidavit before Nanavati Commission that Jagdish Titler was leading the mob. I have seen him. Then he appeared before Nanavati Commission, and before Nanavati Commission also he gave the statement just Jagdish Titler was there. Thereafter, some affidavit was filed by somebody in Nanavati Commission in Punjabi, purportedly signed by Gyani Surinder Singh. I don't know Punjabi, I don't know English, I don't know English, I do not know what Fulka has written. I never told Fulka. It is Fulka who has himself written the name of Titler in the affidavit. So this affidavit was filed. So this was the background of Titler, what Titler was doing it. So now after this TV debate, what happened? Titler said, the whole Sikh community is with me. It is only Fulka who is against me. So now to prove it that the whole Sikh community is with Titler, he manipulated the president of Delhi Sikh Gurdwara Management Committee. Now there are main 2 bodies of Sikhs in India. One is the HGPC, the other is the Delhi Committee. That is the second most powerful committee. The president of the Delhi Sikh Gurdwara Management Committee gave Saropao and Kirpan to titler after that debate to show that the Sikhs are supporting. And the president of Delhi Gurdwara Committee was going around telling people, ਅਸੀਂ ਫੂਲਕਾ ਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਟਲ ਭਾਈ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਖਰਾਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ, ਤੰਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ. We will not allow Fulka to trouble our title bhai sahab. When this he was going around and saying, so this was what was happening at him. Fortunately, because of their probably internal politics, whatever, Prakash Singh Badal came in my favor. So that time he gave the statement, which was the most needed for me, that the whole Sikh community is behind Fulka. Don't think he's alone. So then what happened after that? The CBI investigation. The CBI came to me when this Nanavati Commission report was published in 2005. Nanavati recommended that registration of case against Jagdish Titler and Sajjan Kumar. Government rejected it. So there was a hangama in the parliament. 3 days the parliament didn't work. And now, thanks to Brinda Karat, that time CPM and CPI, they were supporting the Manmohan Singh government from outside. It was on their support that the Manmohan Singh government survived. So Brinda Karat had 3-4 meetings with me, and the whole left group went and told the government, we will not support you. You will have to register cases. It's because of that these cases were registered. When these cases were registered, so they planned to give clean chit to title and involve me. And they said the way of involving me was that probably the CBI found that it's a little difficult for them to catch me. So they wanted to involve some other lawyers in my team. So they came to me, say, this affidavit is signed and attested by HGS Ahluwalia. It's not by you. So it is Ahluwalia who has to answer. I said, don't even go to him. He was the part of my team. I am responsible for his action. Whatever you want to ask me. Don't ask Ahluwalia. So this was the kind of the attempt by them. Thereafter, Titler was given clean chit by the CBI 3 times. All 3 times we challenged it in the court, and it was rejected. Ultimately, the court directed that now the court will monitor the investigation. As a result of that, monitoring the investigation today, the trial is going on against these taxes. Thank you so much.
And Sir, Nirpreet's role in it.
Now, Nirpreet Kaur is a victim. She was just 16 years at that time in 1984. Her father was president of the Gurdwara and a big transporter. And he was close to Sajjan Kumar. On 1st November, these people of Sajjan Kumar came, who was very close and used to come to his father regularly. They brutally killed his father in front of her eyes. So she decided that she will fight for justice. She was only 16 years at that time, a minor at that time. She was going around collecting the statements, and there was one Air Force officer, Wing Commander Pannu, who was helping her. So what they did, they got Wing Commander Pannu killed. Though they have shown it is an accident, but Nirpreet's mother got very scared that they will kill her also. She sent them to Punjab. So in Punjab, she after that joined All India Sikh Federation. Then she had even approached some militants also in Punjab. And ultimately, she was arrested. She was in the jail. For 8 years, she was in the jail. And when she came out, that's the time she decided that I should fight the legal battle now. So this is the story from gun to pen, opposite to what the Indian films show. From gun to pen. So she's the main witness in Sajjan Kumar case. The case where the Sajjan Kumar is in jail now. He's been in jail since last 6 years. Nirpreet is the main witness. She also started working as a volunteer with our team to approach and to go and contact the other witnesses. When this came, when the clean chit was first time given by the CBI to Jagdish Titler, That's a long story. I will not tell you how we managed it. But that time we filed a protest petition. When a closure report is filed, the victim can file a protest petition. So we filed it on behalf of Delhi Gurdwara Management Committee, and the court rejected it. That the Gurdwara committee does not have a locus, so you have to file it from a victim. So that these 3 Sikhs who were killed, we were not able to approach their families, so we signed the job to Narpreet Kaur to go and contact them. Narpreet went to the office of the STM where the compensation was given. From that office, she located the widow of one of the deceased over there, Badal Singh. She went to her house, convinced her, and brought us, and we filed a protest petition on her behalf. And till today, if this case is alive, it is because of the signatures of Lakhvinder Kaur. They tried their best to pressure Lakhvinder Kaur. There were many attacks on Lakhvinder Kaur. Lakhvinder Kaur is a peon in a government school. But that lady, she stood. She didn't budge. And if this case is alive till today, it is because of the effort of these 2 women.
So, Paramjeet.
Yeah, Tilak Vihar is a very challenging story for us also. I have been associated with PUDR for the last 30 years now, actually. The PUDR which brought Who Are the Guilty, which is known as Kali Kitab, hit list, whatever you call it. This book was translated into 3 languages, Doshi Kaun Hai, Doshi Kaun Han, in Punjabi. In Punjabi, it was published by AFDR, which is another democratic rights organization, Association for Democratic Rights. But this book was printed en masse, means you can say thousands of copies by anyone, because PUDR reports are not copyrighted reports. Anybody can publish it. So at that time, during 85 and 86, this report was printed by many of the groups, many of the political parties, and distributed. And after that, when these 2 incidences, which have been mentioned by Fulkaji also, this report was banned. And till today, the Punjabi version of PUDR's report, Who Are the Guilty, published by AFDR, is banned document till today. Tilak Vihar, I'll come. We also started, see, PUDR has the journey, it does not end with Who Are the Guilty. PUDR's association with 1984 has been continuing, and it's continuing till today also. It was not only the Who Are the Guilty. After that, we came in 1987. So there's, every year we try to do something, whatever our capacity is there. It's a very small organization run by, like Uma is part of PUDR till today also. And we call it Choti Ladai, Chote Logon ki Ladai. यानी victims are those, means जिनके लिए कोई है नहीं, hand holding, marginalized people, workers, Dalits. So we work with them. And communal rights is also one of the things which we always take. And we also, in this communal rights also, we see the impact on the marginalized section of the society. So Tilak Vihar has a very typical nature of, if you see the demographic composition, as they were discussing, like Lubana and Sikh Ligar community, they came from Sindh. First they were in Rajasthan near Alwar. They were given land there actually. But the land was not cultivable, no irrigation facilities. So once they tried and they came to Delhi, we don't need this land. In lieu of that land, we need. So they started staying here in the Juggis and shanties here near Old Delhi, and then they were given plots in Tilak Vihar and Trilokpuri and Kalyanpuri, small, and they were workers, hardcore workers actually, rickshaw wale, wrench wale, chabi wale, tale wale, that kind of, or that kind of the court, manjiyan binne wale. So the two communities. So Tilak Vihar and the after Tilokpuri riots, most of them, Tilokpuri, Sultanpuri, Kalyanpuri, Mongolpuri, they have shifted to this Tilak Vihar, and also known as in Widows Colony also there's somebody told. So last, we did a report in 1987. We also did a report in 1992, what is happening. And after that also, every year we have been doing something. But despite, because PUDR has a lot of work, other kind of work we do. So that consistency was there, but it was not in that kind of that we could, the mark which has left in 1984, the PUDR report, the Who Are the Guilty. Last year, we also decided that it is the 40th year, to look at the criminal justice system. Who Are the Guilty gives you the list of the names of the people who were involved in 1984. The debate being apart, I'm not going to that, whether we should name it or not name it. But this report has, as Fulkaji also said, that has become a living document in even affidavits, as well as the a kind of for strengthening the cases against whatsoever happened. So last year we also started going to Tilak Vihar to look what has happened to the cases, what has happened to those cases. Fulkaji or others, the cases which are in limelight are the high-profile cases. We were looking at the cases of those people who were staying in Trilokpuri, Kalyanpuri, Sultanpuri, these areas. And very sadly, I'm saying that all those cases, most of the cases have बंद हो गए हैं या चले ही नहीं हैं, या वो उस स्टेज पे नहीं जा पाए जहां पर they should have gone. Only high-profile cases, only one or two cases, I think, Madam is sitting here, Kamna Vora. Fulkaji is also here. There's a case of Darshan Kaur. How can you forget that strong lady actually, who fought? The case was against H.K.L. Bhagat, and the story of Nirpreet Kaur is there. But the story of Darshan Kaur in itself, when we had gone through it, really challenging. Who had the struggle and resistance by the Tilak Vihar, few people is still continuing, I mean to say that, and seeking justice. And they say कि अगर एक भी केस में न्याय मिलता है तो हमें नींद आ जाएगी. So that kind of thing, to cut short, I am saying that the story of Tilak Vihar, when we had gone there, as Aman said, कि आ गए, season आ गया है, and yes, मैं भी October में ही गया था, and I had to hear the same thing, कि आ गए, season आ गए, people come here, make our film and then go away. We are not getting justice. We are there only. Our life has not changed. We are still the working class people and nothing has changed. Sometime I think that the Sikh community, I think Sanam would be sharing this with me, that the Sikh community is such a strong community, SGPC, and if you see their budget actually, the annual budget of SGPC and DSGMC, they can easily, take care of Tilak Vihar. Not one Tilak Vihar, many Tilak Vihars, I would say. So these are the things which has to be seen when we are seeking justice for the last 40 years. So these are the challenges. Anyhow, at present, Uma is also part of that team which we are working. We are with the great help of Fulkaji and Kamna Vora and others, the lawyer, even Nirpreet Kaur, the kind of documents we are going through, that why their cases have not gone to that stage. What was the problem? So we want to come out with a report which will be again the who are the guilty, but this time it will be not the guilty people, actually the guilty, the system actually, that how the criminal justice system helps, if you have the means and ways, you can reach to some point, even in the criminal justice system also. One is that. The other part which I want to respond about the book, my association, With PUDR goes with my own story also. I'm from a very small town, Jharkhand, now Jharkhand, and when I was working with PUDR, this question always occurred in my mind: why does the right happen in my town actually? So I went to my town after 30 years to seek for this answer, and result is that book which is there, and it interjects the PUDR, my role in PUDR. It strengthens my, the resolution and everything that the marginalized section of the community that should be taken care of, and we should look for that.
Thank you, Paramjit. So, Sanam, how did you come up with this book? Because, as Harinder mentioned earlier, there has been a silence inside our families also. There has been a silence about what happened to the women of 1984. And notice it took us 4 decades to have a book like his, which is called, the book is behind us. And what is your take on this silence? And as Paramjit also mentioned, the role of Jagdish Kaur in the making of your book.
So for me, the cause of 1984 started in 2014 when I visited Tilak Vihar first time, and that was for Amnesty International's campaign. We wanted to commemorate the 30th anniversary, but I think that was a time when, for the first time, when you enter Tilak Vihar, unfortunately, which is also known as Widows Colony. That's the reference that any rickshaw guy will drop you there very quickly if you tell them that you want to go to Widows Colony. For the first time, I did not meet the women there. My first interaction in Tilak Vihar were with these men who are in their 40s, and this guy, I still remember. I was sitting at his place. He did not speak to me for the first 10 minutes. और उसके बाद वो मुझे कह रहा है कि मैं चीज़ें भूल जाता हूँ. I forget things. I was a school dropout, and then he randomly started talking, and he said nobody speaks about us. And then suddenly his mother came in, and she told me that he's not in good health and he can't talk. He said, no, I want to talk to you. I want to tell you what happened with me, what happened with my father. Why did I stop going to school? He said, मुझे स्कूल में सीख कबाब कहा जाता था, और मुझे स्कूल में हम लोगों को ये भी बोला जाता था ये फादरलेस कॉलोनी से आते हैं, विडोज कॉलोनी. एंड ही सेड मेरे फादर को मैंने जलते हुए देखा है. एंड देन ही आस्क्ड मी, आपके फादर हैं? आई सेड हाँ हैं. एंड ही सेड अगर उनको कुछ हो जाएगा तो आपका क्या रिएक्शन होगा? आई हैड नो वर्ड्स. आई ऑफ कोर्स, when all of a sudden somebody asks you a question like that, you have no answer for that. Unfortunately, my father passed away 2 years later, and when I went back, I met the same guy again, and he asked me the same question. He said, आपके father हैं? मैंने कहा नहीं. He said, death कैसे हुई? I said, it was a natural death in the hospital. He said, मेरे father को जला दिया गया था. आपको लगता है डॉक्टर्स ने आपके father को मारा है? And to be very honest, for the first year after my father's death, I thought Fortis Hospital is responsible for killing my father. And now imagine that this young boy has seen his father being burnt alive in front of him. How do you expect him to forget that? And none of them are looking for closure. They don't want to forgive you also. And I think they have every right to not forgive, to forget. All they're asking for is acknowledgement. And that never happens. Like Sir rightly pointed out, that every year around October, November, you will find all of us I would say, would go there, want to talk to them, right? But what Lakshmi Kaur told me is that we are the forgotten citizens of India. हमारे बाप दादा वहाँ से चलकर आए थे यहाँ, हमें लगा था ये हमारा घर है, और 84 में जो हमारे साथ हुआ, क्या ये सच में हमारा घर है? And as a minority, I will say that I also live in that fear of backlash, that constant fear of backlash. And I think dictum unity in diversity is built over the bodies of minorities. और we never realize कि दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय में पढ़ती एक लड़की अचानक पंजाब चली जाती है, बंदूक उठा लेती है. Who's responsible? State is responsible. दर्शन कौर, सतवंत कौर के साथ 40 साल तक क्या हुआ, उसकी कोई बात क्यों नहीं हुई? And this is, I think it's a worldwide problem that two men start the conflict, then they shake hands, and in between we forget women and children. We don't talk about that. It's completely erased. When you go back and speak to Darshan Kaur, when you speak to Satwant Kaur, who I remember during my first conversation with her, she, again, these conversations are very tough. And I also wanted, when I was there, that I wanted to, make them comfortable, and there's no pressure from my side. That's why it took me 10 years. And Satwan ji ke ghar par baithe the, and she suddenly started singing Chal Ud Ja Re Panchi. And then she said, मैं बचपन में लता मंगेशकर जैसी सिंगर बनना चाहती थी. And then I got married very early. And but all her life, she raised her children, she had a family, she settled down her brothers, everybody through singing at nightclubs, jagrans in Delhi. She was gang raped in 1984, and she didn't speak about it for very long. And there are many like her. I remember again on one of those rainy days, I was again there to meet the survivors. But the home I had to go, they were not at home, and I saw a big lock. But the home next to her, there was this woman who would never speak to me. She would look at me but would never speak to me. And उस दिन उन्होंने कहा आप अंदर आ जाइए. तो जब मैं अंदर जाकर बैठा तो मैंने उनसे पूछा आप मुझसे बात क्यों नहीं करते. वो कुछ बोले नहीं, एक चाय पिलाया और जाने से पहले बोले मैं 84 की लड़की हूँ. और जब आप पहली बार सुनते हो, I was born 7 years after 1984. It didn't hit me, to be very honest. I didn't realize what she's saying. It took me almost 10 minutes to understand what she's saying. और फिर जब उन्होंने बात करना शुरू किया, I still get teary-eyed when I talk about it. She said, मुझे घसीट कर लेकर जा रहे थे, मैंने अपनी मम्मी को बोला मम्मी मैंने छड़ के ना जाएं. Don't leave me here. And she said my mother was waiting there. So these are the stories. I think these are very, very important stories. And we have a shameless history of communal violence. And it didn't stop. It was, I would say, we were very, we were trying to help people in Delhi in 2020, in hospitals and relief camps, and I've seen that it's the same playbook. And it's because of the staggering delays in justice. It is because of the impunity around the 1984, and it is being used. And the other problem is that a lot of times we only talk about the politics around it. We don't talk about what is happening in the homes of these women. There were a lot of them who told me that please don't name us, but we didn't speak of sexual violence, because we were worried. We were worried about our brothers. We were worried about, I was worried about my father. Mothers told us that we were worried that who will marry these girls. So that's why these stories were never discussed. And they don't want to talk about it. And when you speak to Darshanji, she said, गुरदाली जब उनका बलात्कार हुआ और जब वो बाहर आई हैं तो ऐसे लगा था अभी कोई बच्चा पैदा हुआ और वो आ रहा है बाहर. She was the first woman raped. And then she said, हम सबको पार्क में बिठा दिया गया था और हम सब जो हमारे पास कपड़े थे हमने उसके कपड़े डाले उसके ऊपर, and it never stopped. And it's so shameful. I mean, it's almost 4 decades and we're still discussing it that दिल्ली की सड़कों पर एक तरफ एक VVIP फ्यूनरल की तैयारी हो रही है और उसी भारत में कई सिख औरतें दिल्ली की सड़कों पर पनाह मांग रही हैं. They were running around the streets of New Delhi and with no protection. बहुत औरतों को पुलिस वालों ने बोला आप खाना खा लीजिए, we can help you with food, but you have to go. Of course, there are definitely stories of hope where Hindu neighbors, Muslim neighbors have helped their neighbors. They've fought for them. And I think it will always be because we are a society like that. It won't change. But मेजॉरिटी जो उन लोगों के साथ हुआ, और उसके बाद द साइलेंस अराउंड इट, आई थिंक वी हैव फॉरगॉटन दैट हिस्ट्री ऑफ एट्रोसिटी एंड ऑपरेशन इज एवरीवन्स हिस्ट्री एंड इट्स अ कलेक्टिव फेलियर. जो हम इसकी बात नहीं करते हैं, इट्स अ कलेक्टिव फेलियर. एंड वहीं जब आप माइनॉरिटी से होते हैं और अपने राइट्स की बात करना शुरू करते हैं, तो आपको एकदम से लेबल कर दिया जाता है. फिक्टिशियस एनिमीज प्रॉप करना स्टेट के लिए कोई बड़ी बात नहीं. State will go to any length to justify their action. From attacking your holiest shrine to killing thousands of people on the street, state will always have a justification. And again, I would say that I have 1 minute. None of these survivors are looking for closure. They don't want to forgive. They're only looking for closure and acknowledgement of what has happened in the past. And I hope that happens soon. Thank you.
I've also been going back to Tilak Vihar. Over the years, I have been to Tilak Vihar about 3 or 4 times, again in the usual style, and in which around the critical moments, maybe a judgment has come, maybe something like that has happened. One has gone back there, and so it's not that one went for the first time. Now I think must have gone about 4 or 5 times at least in the 40 years that we are. Also was in touch with, say, for instance, you might go to a program that Sanam himself organizes, in which Darshan Kaur is one of the speakers, and I'm the other speaker. And so I got to know Darshan as a woman who was telling her story, and I heard it from her in that sense at all. Now I want to actually focus on pick up on this theme of when, for whatever reasons, we went for all of us, I think, went for what was the visible line of, in the Who Are the Guilty, we went for the visible characters whom we wanted to indict as people who were responsible for for generating the violence. There's no doubt about it, and one should have done that. But in the process, I think what did also happen is that we dropped what was happening to the survivors. And the survivors, and I want to say this with great emphasis, 84 is an experience, it's collective, it's had a collective, what would you call it? It was a collective violence upon the entire community, upon the Indian society generally. But it was borne, the burden of this was borne by the women. And the burden of this was borne by the women of Tilak Vihar, of these resettlement colonies, because the biggest slaughter happened in these colonies. It's there that you suddenly, everyone who reads that story will find how even the news people come to know that there is a big slaughter that is happening. And why is it that this slaughter happened in the colonies? That slaughter did not happen in the middle class colonies. It did not happen in the elite colonies. It happened in this poor, deprived place. And they were all abandoned. We went for the justice. Okay, so there are the Nirpreet Kaur, there is the Darshan Kaur. But what is happening to the ordinary woman over there? How does she survive? And one of my protagonists in that book said, वो जो वायलेंस है वो तो औरतों ने देखा, हम तो छुपे हुए थे, जो छुपे हुए थे या छुप करके निकल गए या हमें मार डाला. The fact is that the witnesses of 84 were the women. It's the women who witnessed. That is why they have borne the entire burden of the entire judicial system. Why is it that Darshan Kaur gets attacked? And she gets attacked by sections of the Sikhs.
Member of the Gurudwara.
And a member of the Gurudwara committee. She gets attacked. they go to jail. And you know, they have just been thrown into the gutter and left there. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Unke bache, they are responsible. They get these load. Even the compensation, 10,000. Then it goes up as the value of communal violence का victims के जो उसकी जो monetary compensation है वो बढ़ती चली जाती है, फिर वो 10 हो जाता है, वो it becomes x number of lakhs of rupees. The fact is, these are women, and then they have seen, they've had to go to work, they've carried the burden of the entire witnessing, bearing witness, and their children have gone astray. It's a whole colony in which one generation of kids, young sardars who couldn't actually take what had happened to their fathers. Some of them had been उनके गुत्ते बना करके, उनको सलवार कमीज पहना करके उनको भगाया गया था, and that's how they escaped. How are they going to survive afterward? You tell me, वो 13-year-old boy या 12 साल का जो लड़का है, how will he survive in the next? He knows if he got saved like this, there were others who got killed, who got slaughtered. So it is they who have this entire generation. They went as there was no way they could survive this. Even Nirpreet is a heroine. Nirpreet का भाई उसको पकड़ करके बार जब उसको पकड़ने की कोशिश करते, Nirpreet का भाई who is who owns a taxi stand and who has been my the person who has driven me around. Nirpal was also picked up from time to time and beaten up. He just took to drinking binges. And he died. He died at the age, खाता नहीं था उस वक्त and so on. So एक पूरा generation जो है उनको आपने मार दिया, और इन औरतों के साथ तो जो किया आज भी they will tell you, दर्शन को, और you start talking to her, immediately she starts telling you about the sexual violence. And I want to say that. See, हमने भी, I'm a feminist. हम सब, Lolly Ramdas, all of us, we picked up on the other questions. Rehabilitation. कैसे इनकी survival करनी है? How shall we help them to? The fact is that the erasure on the sexual violence was conducted. We were all complicit in it. हम भी नहीं बोले. मेरी जो यही किताब है उसमें the very first opening testifier नानकी बाई बताती है कि एक औरत मर गई following was there a case filed? Did anyone act on that matter? Nothing. So we had commissions of inquiry, we had many, sorry, I'm so sorry. We had so many, ways in which we were remembering this. But we completely abandoned the women. We abandoned justice in its true sense of the term. And because we did that, it was repeated. And then there were slanging. I'm finishing, don't worry. Oh, and then we had slanging matches. You go to a discussion and you'll get 884 against 2002. और मेरे को इतना गुस्सा आता था, ऐसे I would say, shut up you characters. There are some of us who stood in 84, we stood in 2002 also. You don't cancel each other out. One wrong does not cancel the other wrong out. वो पार्लियामेंट तक में जॉर्ज फर्नांडिस ने बोला था, और उसकी कमेंट्स इतनी खराब है कि उसको एक्सपंज करना पड़ा. ये हमारी हालत है. Where is the accountability? Where is the rule of law? Where is the justice? And everybody's hands are soaked in blood.
Omaji mentioned about PUDR report, and that PUDR report does not cover the rehabilitation part. Who are the guilty is, though I was not part of it, I joined a month later. But what I see, who are the guilty, the focus was on the investigation, who did it. Focus was on that. The rehabilitation was by Nagarika Ekta Manch. So it was Nagarika Ekta Manch has given a report. That report covered the rehabilitation. These aspects which you are mentioning, that is covered in Nagarika Ekta Manch.
No, but ongoing, ongoing what has happened to Tilak Vihar and the women of Tilak
No,
Vihar.
that is there.
I know.
I am talking only about the report.
Uh-huh.
Now, the point is that since because of the reason that these cases, everybody became more interested in the conviction of these people. So, therefore, rehabilitation report is not talked about. And the investigative report of who are the guilty, that is more talked about. So, otherwise, that Nagar Ektaman's report is also there.
Even that is not talked enough about. वो भी मैं मानती हूँ. ऐसी बात नहीं है.
सेक्सुअल वायलेंस का जो मेमोरी है उसको इरेज किया गया है, उसकी रिकॉर्डिंग नहीं हुई है. दैट हैज़ बीन द केस. There was also one very important aspect of the violence against the Sikhs in 1984, that was about the erasure of the Sikh identity. When the first, people trying to go and document what had really happened, what they found was that besides the blood and the demolished and the burnt houses, there were also these, hair which had been cut, just chopped off by the families and by the people who were attacking. The intention was it was a kind of a symbolic beheading of the Sikh community. In the course of working on my book, I found this very strange and a very emotional binding with what had been lost. A very prominent Bollywood personality, you may all heard his name, he's one of the finest sound engineers, K.J. Singh, told us about this case, where बॉम्बे में रहते हैं, but they decided कि उनका बेटा जो है उसको बाल नहीं, मतलब let's get it cut, after he became fairly बड़ा हो गया, he was in school and finishing it. तो उसके बाद जो बाल काट के वो आया, मतलब वेरी गुड, सलमान खान ने बताया कि किसके पास जाना चाहिए, मतलब दैट्स अ काइंड ऑफ सर्किट वो. लेकिन बाल काट के जो आया है वो उसमें घर में इट्स केप्ट एज अ ट्रेजर्ड मेमोरेबलिया, एक रिमेम्बरेंस के तौर पे रखा हुआ है. My friend, this friend that I was talking about, who we rescued and took him to IIT. All the three brothers, they cut their hair in 1985 at different months. सबने अपनी अपनी आखिरी पगड़ी को घर पे संभाल के बिल्कुल तह दे के रखा हुआ है. That is very important, which has to be understood. It's a very poignant aspect of this entire violence which was unleashed against them. 2002 के साथ हमेशा juxtapose किया गया है. This was specially done to me, and this is one of the reasons as to why I very vehemently did this book, that after having worked on the politics of the Sangh Parivar, I must work on 1984 because I have something to also say. The question which I asked these people, that in 1984 the civil society was not bandied as anti-national and as people who have destroyed the country. Nagarik Ektamaj was never lambasted by the government. 2002, there was first of all no civil society involvement in the manner in which it was there in 84. Whatever little was there in terms of human rights interventions or in terms of media investigations were always lambasted by the entire Sangh Parivar, that these are the people who destroyed the fabric of Gujarat and by that the country. So this is purely a case of double standards. The last thing, it's a very personal and a very sensitive thing. In the course of the book, I was basically just documenting, like Sanam did, essentially personal experiences of people who had actually gone through the violence, faced violence of various kinds. So there was one family that we went to in Kanpur. It was a family of petty, small business करते थे. कुछ बेटा था, बहू, they had a younger children, and they had father. He was old. Father was the one who was actually the patriarch of the family in 1984. So the son and the daughter-in-law said that father for a very long period of time after 84, उनके पास एक स्कूटर होती थी बजाज की जो जला दिया गया है, and he could never make enough money to ever buy a Bajaj scooter in his life. Later on, the son was become, but at that point they lived it, right? And the father would be awake late at night watching television, and he would wait till the time that iconic advertisement of the Bajaj scooters, Buland Bharat ki Buland Tasveer. That was in fact a very poignant memory which somebody shared. तब तक जगे रहते थे जब तक वो एडवर्टाइजमेंट नहीं बचता था.
We should have left it at that lovely story. But I'm just going to, I think, as a historian, say two uh, sort of more serious things. One is that while we talk about the violence, let us recall one thing, which is that violence is only the tip of the iceberg, and what we need to recall is that it is communal ideology which is there in society, and we do need to be aware of that all the time. And this is that's one thing. And lastly, I feel that um, if we go back to our freedom struggle, and particularly to Mahatma Gandhi and his, not what he wrote only, but what he did. Gandhiji always said, "My life is my message." And right now, I'm finishing a book. I'm writing a book, I should say. When I finish, I'll know. A book on Gandhi's last years. And when I'm writing on his mission in Noakhali, and I got so much understanding and insights to understand communalism today, particularly 84. As Uma said, as Nilanjan said, we were all saw ourselves as secular fighters against communalism. This is what we saw ourselves as. And certainly, I know that coming from a left tradition, then I was very skeptical of religious identity. And for me, like the ease with which you say that, religious identity, but no, for I had to turn to Gandhi to understand that Gandhiji going in Noakhali, villages burnt, people have been killed, and etc., women raped on a very huge scale, abductions. And what is the message that he's giving? He's telling the women who come to him, he said, do your Namashang Kirtan, do your Kirtan, wear your bangles, the red and white bangles which the women in Bengal. So the whole message was reclaim your faith, have the courage to reclaim your faith. And it was so powerful for me that when I went there as a doing a taking the steps on the Padyatra that Gandhiji had done, I went 4 years ago, and it was wonderful. There's a Gandhi ashram there in Noakhali still, and there was a function on Mujib's birthday, and they were all the children had been dressed up as different personalities from the freedom struggle, all Muslim children, and they were singing Raghupati Raghav Rajaram. So, this is again just something that one wants to share, that we need to somewhere go beyond this idea that we have as secularists, that we counterpose, say, class to religion, and or we counterpose a different type of tradition. So be aware about the importance of fighting communal ideology, because until we fight that, violence will go on erupting. And be aware of the importance of religion, not see religion as a kind of other and something that we have to just expose.
Thank you. I want to thank Ms. John Dayal sir, because many years back he once messaged me. He said, ये 84 का stories, we need to bring about those who helped the victims at that time. So in my mind, it was always a running theme. So when Harinder Paji asked me, I said, let's try to do this. And Choli sir, for all the work that PUCL has done for the report. And in my mind, this event had always been a sort of tribute to Mita Bose, who we lost some time back, and I just felt we didn't even record her. We didn't even get her views.
We did. She's in my book.
Yeah, no, there she is. But all the work that she did with children later on, you know, I mean, as Uma ma'am said, the whole generation has been devastated, but many tried to save that generation also. Those stories are also very important. Sorry, no questions. Sorry, less time for tea. We have to give 1 or 2 minutes to Harinder to conclude the talk. And I think the session had an emotion which will carry on, and we'll have many questions and there will be many answers. We can do that discussion outside.
Thanks to the panelists, every single one of you and the respondents, and Amandeep for moderating it, and Adhika for helping with all the logistics. I want to just mention very quickly in 2 minutes 3 things. One is my ask of all the panelists and respondents actually, that the community we are talking about, and it was just acknowledged, maybe the left also needs to reconsider the role of religion. We must understand the Sikh narrative of it, instead of saying, why are they not doing it only like this? And it is, the Sikh narrative is not Gandhiism, although Gandhiism is important in Indian narrative. Sikh narrative is in Guru Granth Sahib. That's our... The Sikh narrative is also in the dictums of what Guru said, and that's part of the lived experiences of the communities. So it's very important, the academia is acknowledging this, that please do understand from a Sikh narrative angle why Sikhs do what they do. And I had already acknowledged in the opening that something changed in '84, that we have been talking only the victim perspective. So the ones who are choosing not to accept the victim narrative, it has to do with our 550-year history. The second part would be, but thank you for your work. I think every single thing mentioned is extremely important, but do realize it is extremely complex as well. So the community's perspective from its ideological angle is extremely important as well. Second is that the first 10 years I mentioned, I didn't know what to do. I was in silence. And then at the 20th anniversary and the 30th and now the 40th, I've been trying to work with people in Punjab, in what we call now Inspora. Amandeep and I have come up with that term in the last couple of years. And the diaspora. Look, we can say whatever we want, but it is diaspora which is helping on many things and keeping even certain things alive. The second 20th anniversary is when you first had the legal analysis done, because the affidavits which Mr. Fulka shared and we digitized, and then we got other reports and affidavits, we republished who are the guilty. Citizens Commission, Justice SikhRI's report in mass in the West. We didn't care whether it's copyrighted or not, and we were republishing every year because we needed to tell the story, and anyone who was telling the story was called terrorist. So in India, maybe that wasn't the case. In the West, and it was definitely the case, those people, I am one of those, will say, ye terroriston ki kyun baat karte ho? India ke khilaf baat ho rahi hai. So this was really a reproduction, and then legal analysis came out. From the West, organizations like Insaf built on the work you guys have done, who are now taking on the idea of impunity head on with even better documentations. So documentation and first responders is where things start. You heard the legal perspectives, but even fiction starts to show up. We, for the first time in last 10 years, you're seeing serials are coming outside of Bukhara story came only last year. All the Thakur girl had 4 pages talking about why it is not being discussed in New Delhi. It's a novel otherwise. So things did start to happen, but I think the time is to archive all this, all these collections, all these narratives, the sub-narratives. There is no monolith. So we're not going to go after one monolith either. So we are looking into archiving all this. We started a very systematic process on it because there are many stories which are also not available or accessible. every story is important, but the larger narrative is equally important. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to all the panelists. And the ask remains, this is one subset of 17 genocidal campaigns happening today, which means the world, and the world includes New Delhi. We were only focused on New Delhi of 84 today, but there was almost every state, now it's documented, there were killings. Right? I'll end with a personal one. I am here today because not my next door neighbor, but the one next to it, Bhagwan Das, decided to take us to his house. Otherwise, who knows what would happen that day. And partly it happened because it was the DC of Jhansi, Mr. Kashyap, who decided, no, we're not going to let that happen. It also happened because the major general in the town was General Matharu, a Sikh man. Jhansi is a cantonment. He says, kuch karke dekhao, hum bhi tank nikal lenge. So there is no one thing which stops things. I also remember my dad was union leader. He was with George Fernandez in a different context during emergencies. My mom used to tell me, pata hi nahi hota tha kahan hai 2-3 mahine. But when he says to me, within 2 weeks, ab ye mera desh nahi raha. Those are many sentiments. I don't want us to get I work very hard to not just take one element or one sentiment. I think they're all important. And in that importance comes the larger narrative of what is the role of essentially what we now call accountability and reparations. You heard it even from Uma ma'am. At the end of the day, it's the state. Individual actions going to be all sorts of emotions. It's the accountability has to come at the state level, and the reparations have to be done. We have worked on the project. Even the survivors' narrative is very complex. Yeah, I've gone there more than 20 times, but never in October, November. We tried to work on the project to create a livelihood with Sardar Patwan Singh, Mr. Fulka, and others. For 2 years, we worked on it, how to create a livelihood. It is much more complex. There are many things going on which we are not discussing today. People in West ask me, KD organization no paise deiye. मैं क्या address नहीं उन्होंने सिद्धे दे आओ. I don't know which one to recommend. Because I've seen what happens when we take the money also. Because there's accountability problem there also. So we know we are living in a very complex times, but the larger thing is these things are continuing. Do realize that 84, what happened were series of things. Operation Blue Star was, Operation Shanti was operation which was preponed. This is how the pogroms happened. Today we call that in genocidal language, it was systematic and widespread. Much more work is needed to understand it from a legal angle, document more stories, create systems so it won't happen, because we know it is continuing. Hopefully all of you can be, if not agents of justice, supporters of those who are trying to get justice in any form. There is no one form. There are many forms which you may not like, but there are also forms of justice. Thank you again.